Hello everyone, welcome to the Schluter Systems Ditra Heat training. My name is Doug Danduran, I'm a retail territory manager from the Midwest. Today we're going to work through the planning, the installation, and ultimately the love of Ditra Heat in an area in your home in which you have a tiled surface or ultimately an alternative floor covering. First, the things we need to consider in a bathroom or kitchen or whatever your space may be is that we ultimately have three different areas in a space. We have our total area, we have our tiled area, and we have our heated area. In this example we have for you today, we have our total area is ultimately 4 foot by 8 foot. Our tiled area is going to be reduced by our floor vent and our plumbing drain, and our heated area is going to be reduced by a vanity, our plumbing drain, and our floor vent. So we have to do some basic calculations in order to determine those. And from there, we can determine the cable size we need, how much mat we need, and ultimately our tile as well. To install this system today, I'm going to invite my friend here, Garrick Sweeney, to do some trialing for me as we install this system. After the calculations we've done, we've figured that the best cable size for us is our 21 square foot cable, and that's what we'll be using in our bathroom situation here today. The next thing we're going to work with is to show you the consistency that is required for when we're installing Ditra Heat or any of our membranes. What we're looking for is a nice, creamy, smooth consistency that is nice and loose, but yet still able to hold the notch from the trowel. This is going to ensure proper adhesion to the mat and give you a great lasting system. So when we're installing Ditra Heat or any of our membranes, the first thing we're going to want to do is to take a damp sponge and we're going to want to wet our substrate. The reason we want to do that is most of the substrates in a construction site are thirsty substrates. They're very dry, very porous. So we need to ensure that the first drink of water that the substrate gets is not from our thin set. So taking this damp sponge gives that substrate a nice small drink of water, but it also does a great job of removing what we call bond breakers, fine dust particles and other things that might inhibit the adhesion of the thin set to the substrate. So as you can see, Garrick's done a nice job of just removing the bond breakers and giving that substrate a drink. And now he can take his thin set and apply some to the floor. So what we're looking for is to take the flat side of that trowel and to burn that thin set into the substrate. And what this does is this helps ensure the proper coverage we need and the proper bond between the substrate and the Ditra Heat mat. So we're ultimately just looking to find a nice smooth coat over the entire surface, and then we can actually take more thin set and apply it back over the substrate using the notch side of our trowel. In this situation for Ditra Heat membrane, we're going to want to use a 1/4 by 1/4 square notch trowel for Ditra Heat membrane. That is the proper amount of thin set to ensure that we get the proper bond with this membrane. The other thing that we want to make sure we do with any of our membranes is to do what we call directionally troweling. Directionally troweling ensures that the air behind the membrane can escape throughout those channels and making sure we don't get a dead spot in our thin set and ultimately causing failure in the membrane. So as you can see here, Garrick's done an excellent job of directionally troweling. In this situation, we are actually using our Ditra Heat mats. Ditra Heat is also offered in other different styles of membrane. We have our Ditra Heat rolls, which is 135 square feet. And we also have Ditra Heat Duo, in which we'll talk about that here in a little while. So as you can see, Garrick's not got quite enough there, so he's going to spread out a little more so he can make sure he gets the entire mat covered. And once he's done with that, then he's going to just use a simple wood float to embed the membrane into the thin set. Other options would be a small vinyl roller or a 75-pound maximum vinyl roller as well. So it's just a very simple technique. We want to apply firm but consistent pressure across the membrane and making sure that we embed that thin set into the back of the membrane. Making sure that we work all the way across the membrane to get that full coverage that we're looking for. One of the huge benefits of Ditra Heat is it's incredibly easy to install, and it gives you increased productivity. So what we are actually looking for when we do this is to just do a simple check and to pull that membrane back and make sure that we've got nice coverage across the back of that. Usually what we would compare that to is a nice peanut butter sandwich. And then just take and embed that membrane right back in. That simple 30-second check can make sure that, again, that you get that proper coverage on that, as well as getting a quality installation. So now he's just going to move backwards and find himself some more space. Again, taking that damp sponge, wetting down the substrate in order to give that substrate a nice small drink, and again, remove those bond breakers before he installs his next sheet of membrane. As you can tell, that thin set he's using there is a nice loose consistency, flows very nicely, and does a great job of adhering that membrane to the substrate. With our thin set, the practice that we like to preach is that we do what we call a 5-10-3 method. We want to mix for 5 minutes, let it slake or sit for 10 minutes, and then we want to mix it again slowly for another 3. And that will ensure that you get a great consistency of your thin set, very nice workability, and a superior product in the finish. Ditra Heat membrane is what we'd consider one of our uncoupling membranes. That is one of the great advantages of this system, is that we also gain the benefits of the uncoupling. Uncoupling is the principle in which the entire system is bonded to the substrate, but the substrate and the tile system can move independently of one another in order to prevent cracked tiles and cracked grout, two of our most common failures in a tile assembly. The uncoupling principle is something that you do not receive from most other systems on the market, so that is one of our great advantages. The other nice advantages to Ditra Heat membrane is it is also waterproof. So we can use these in wet areas in which we can just waterproof our seams, and we can gain in a waterproof floor. The Ditra Heat membrane also does a great job with load management, but once we get all this mat filled with thin set, it acts as piers in order to support your load across that mat. Even though it is just a plastic membrane, it does an excellent job of supporting a load. One of the last benefit of the Ditra Heat membrane is what we call vapor management. So if we use Ditra Heat over concrete, we can actually manage the vapors that may be coming and going through that concrete throughout a given time period. So as Garrick works around the air vent here, we've got our Ditra Heat membrane pre-cut. So he's got his hole already cut out. The nice thing with this is, again, it's a plastic membrane. We can cut it with a utility knife. So we can cut it as we move along, or we can pre-cut it and do some planning ahead of time in order to solve that. Just a nice, easy install, just lightweight product that you can just simply lay down on the floor, use that wood float to embed it, and we're already almost ready for our cables. Again, doing that nice simple check to make sure that we've got good coverage across the back of that membrane so we get a good adhesion to our substrate. Just nice simple checks that, again, ensure that quality installation. So with our Ditra Heat membrane, as you can see on the top, it is the puck system. These pucks are oriented on a 1-inch on center spacing, and the nice thing is that we can ultimately run our cable throughout this membrane in either direction. It makes it nice for a flexible system. We also have our cut lines between the pucks, which makes it nice and easy to cut, and also gives you as close to a factory edge as we can when cutting and butting membranes up against one another. One thing that we want to keep in mind when we're aligning sheets together, that we get our pucks as close to lined up to one another as we possibly can. That makes for a nice, easy, smooth transition for the cables between sheets and not causing any kinks in our cable. The back of the membrane, in this situation, this is just standard Ditra Heat. We have the nice white polyethylene fleece on the back, and that is what is actually going to adhere to the thin set and the substrate, ensuring that this membrane stays adhered down. After Garrett gets this sheet installed, we're actually going to show you the nice simple process and how easy it is to cut the membrane with our next piece. So as Garrett, like I said, as Garrett installs this, he's going to make sure that his pucks align, ensuring that that cable can run smoothly between the sheets, and therefore, again, not creating any issues with our cable. So what Garrett's going to do here is to just show the nice simple process that it is to cut it. Like I said, it's just a plastic membrane, so it can be very easily cut with a utility knife. He's laid it on the floor where he likes it. And just with a nice simple score, we can remove the excess and discard that to the side. When it comes to warranties with our Ditra Heat system, the Ditra Heat system warranty can be one of our more complex warranties, but in the situation where we've used All-Set, we can actually achieve a lifetime warranty for the tile assembly when using All-Set to install the membrane as well as the tile over the top. We will discuss the warranties for the cable and the thermostat when we get to those products. got himself some nice coverage, so he knows he can move forward with the next piece. What we're looking for, like I said, is to embed the membrane into the thin set. We're not looking to evacuate the thin set from behind the membrane. We're just looking to ultimately push that into that fleece to make sure that we get the proper bond. So now he can take his last piece. Again, just take his utility knife and make a nice easy score between the pucks with the cut lines that are already designated. Creating a near factory cut between sheets. So like I said, in this situation, we found that we would want to use the 21 square foot cable for this bathroom. So what we have here is just how you'd find the cable at the store. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a nice simple unboxing for you. Inside of the box, we're going to have 2 temperature sensors and our cable spool. We're going to do some testing on this cable right here on this spool to make sure that the cable is meeting factory specifications and nothing has happened to this cable in delivery. And most importantly, we have our instruction booklet. It is very critically important that you read and understand these instructions. It is very beneficial to yourself as well as to the system. We also have 2 silver tags within the box. One is going to be to replace the silver tag that is on your cable if need be to cut it off. And the other is to install in the homeowner's breaker panel so that if there ever is a situation in which the tile installer cannot be there to make a repair, we know exactly what breaker it belongs to and some of the values that belong to that cable. So those are very important. Do not throw those away. We also have a warning label in case there ever need to be a situation in which the tile installer would need to put a warning just so that everyone else knows that there is an electric floor warming system in there and we do not want to penetrate the floor and possibly cause damage to the cables. Within this packet, we also have our data log sheet. As we're doing our testing on the cable, we're going to want to fill in these values on here, and that's how we're going to receive a warranty from Schluter Systems. Also, within the instruction booklet, on page 16, it does an excellent job of illustrating how we're going to do the testing on our cables. But also on page 25, there is also another data log entry place where you can do your initial logs if you want to do them in here, and then transfer them to that other sheet before you send that in for the customer. So Garrick's got all of his membrane down now, and now what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to test our cables. In this situation here, we are actually going to use an AEMC megometer. The megometer is an excellent tool to have if you're going to be installing Ditra Heat. It gives you the potential to push 1,000 volts through the cable to do our 4th and final test, which actually increases our warranty on the system. There's 3 tests that we need to do on the cable in order to receive a 10-year warranty. And the 4th test with this megometer will actually give you the potential for a 15-year warranty on the cable alone. The first test is the continuity test. On that silver tag that you can see there on the cable, it will give you a factory resistance value. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are within 10% of that given factory value as we test the cable, making sure that it's still in proper functioning manner. So Garrick here is just going to take his alligator clips, clip that to the wire, and then turn the megometer here to the traditional ohm setting. And as you can see there, he got 57.3, and the factory value on this cable is 56.4. So we are well within our 10% of our factory value. The next test is the conductor and ground band continuity test. So ultimately what we're looking for here is an open loop or an infinity symbol. Depending on how your meter reads, it might give you a different answer, but ultimately what we're looking for is that we have no electricity passing between one of our leads and our ground braid. Still using the resistance setting on our meter, and as you can see there, it reads open loop or OL. So that was our black lead. We're now going to test our white lead, make sure that we have the same outcome with that. Still reading OL, so we're still good to go there. The third test would be on our temperature sensor. And that fourth test, in order to again achieve that extra 5 years of warranty, would be with the megometer and pushing 1,000 volts through that cable. But we're going to run this third test here on our temperature sensor. And on the sheet, what you'll see here is it's looking for sensor 1 and sensor 2 and what your relative air temperature is and what the reading is that you get from the megometer. In this situation, this meter needs to be on the kiloohm setting in order to get the proper reading. And in this situation, we're looking at 11.7 ohm or kiloohms. And a nice way to test to make sure that that sensor is reading is exactly what Garrick's doing here, and that's just simply putting the temperature probe between his fingers or in the palm of his hand, and as his body temperature warms up that sensor, the resistance on that will actually go down, ensuring that the temperature sensor is working properly. So it looks to me like that temperature sensor is working great. We can go back and do that fourth and final test on our heat cable. This test is only truly capable if you have the megometer. A traditional ohm meter won't be able to do this test, so you'll have to contact a certified electrician or find a megometer to purchase. So what he's going to do here is he's going to turn it to the 1,000 volt setting. It's going to run through a simple test, and it's reading OL. That was our black lead. Now we can do it with our white lead. And as long as this reads OL, we're ready to install our cable. And there we have an OL reading, so our cable's good to go, and we're ready to install it in the floor. These tests on these cables are very critical to be done, and they also need to be done in 3 different times during our installation. Right out of the box, just as we just did, right after we install it into our mat, and then again right after tile but before grout. The most common area for a cable to get damaged is actually during tile installation, so we want to just check it one last final time to make sure that we didn't potentially damage the cable during the installation of tile to ensure that the cable is going to work. So on the cable, there are a few different parts. The black area that you see, the black area of cable is what we'd call our cold lead. That is where the high voltage comes down and joins into this little black box that Garrick here has in his hand. And that is what we'd call our cold lead splice. And as the sticker implies on there, it is very, very crucial that we get this embedded into the floor system. There's a lot of heat that is created inside of that cold lead splice, and we need to make sure that that is dissipated into our flooring assembly. Otherwise, I will be honest, the cable will fail in a short amount of time. The other area that you'll see here is the gray heating cable area, and that is what actually goes and snaps into our Ditra Heat membrane, and that is what creates the heat. There are 2 very small wires inside of that are both surrounded by a ground braid, And that is what creates the heat in our flooring assembly. And last but not least, on the very end, you will find what we call our end splice. And it is also very crucial that we do not cut that off. These cables cannot be altered in any way, as it will cause the cable to fail and ultimately void your warranty. So what Garrick's going to do here is, as you can see, he's got a nice little hole cut in the bottom of his drywall, and we can just shove the cable right up through there and take it up to our junction box up in the wall where you can see our thermostat. So as I said, you want to make sure that we get that cold lead splice down into the floor, and it can ultimately be installed anywhere as long as we're right there close to the wall. And then Garrick's just going to find out where he likes it best, and then just take a Sharpie or a pencil and mark the membrane so that we can cut it out. He's just going to take his utility knife here and go ahead and cut the membrane out. We can just use a simple hot glue gun, a little bit of thin set, or some Curdy Fix in order to adhere this to the floor to make sure that it stays down underneath your tile assembly. So he's got his membrane removed and created a nice little pocket there in order to get that cold lead splice right down and into the floor. So like I said, the pucks in the Ditra Heat membrane are oriented in a 1-inch on center fashion, so the cable can be run in either direction. In this situation, Garrick's going to take and run the long way, again making sure that we avoid around the toilet flange. There's different ways we can install the cable or snap it into those pucks. We can just use our simple wood float that we use to install the membrane. We could use a gum float for grout, or even just your thumb. Another option that I've seen gentlemen use before is to actually cut some scraps of the Ditra Heat membrane using the small puck as a nice place to put your thumb, and using the fleece as a back as a nice smooth surface in order to slide across the cable and snap it down into our membrane. When we install our cables, we want to usually work with what we'd call a 3-puck spacing installation. That is an excellent way to make sure that we get a nice even heat distribution across the flooring assembly. As you can see, Garrick's just doing an excellent job of filling in this area here with a nice simple zigzag pattern to fill in that area. Another option we have for installing our cable is actually what we'd call our 3-2 pattern, but we need to alternate between 3s and 2s. And this is useful in a couple different situations. For installing Ditra Heat over concrete, it gives you an excellent response time and heat ups, but that also is very effective when we have too much extra cable. And that 3-2 pattern actually uses about 30% more cable So if we have too much, we can use the 3-2 pattern to use up some of that extra cable. Because like I said, we cannot alter these cables in any way, shape, or form. So if we have too much cable, we cannot cut it off. And we don't want you to see you tucking it into a wall space or something that could potentially cause a fire in a homeowner's home. So he's made sure to stay those 2 inches away from the wall. With forced air vents, the minimum requirement that we want to stay away from those is 4 inches. If it's an electric baseboard, boiler, piping, things of those natures that create a lot more heat, we're actually going to want to stay 8 inches away from those. So as you can see, he's just working his way back and forth across his room, maintaining that 3 stud spacing, and just working that cable right down and into the membrane. What Garrick's pointing out here for us is what we see is on every one of our cables that we manufacture, we will install a halfway point sticker on that cable. And that does a good job of helping you to see if I have enough cable left for my room. Maybe your planning was off, maybe your calculations were wrong. We can see that might tell us one of 2 things. A, we don't have enough cable, or B, we might have too much cable. So that halfway sticker there is there to help you kind of figure out how much you have left versus how much cable you have left. With our cable spacings, like I said, we're going to stick here with this traditional 3 puck spacing. When it comes to cable spacing though, like I said, we can use that alternating 3-2 stud pattern, but we never want to be more than 3 and never less than 2. More than 3 and you won't get the proper feel and proper warmth from the cable. As you can see, Garrick there put it on a 1 stud spacing. That's never going to work. Ultimately, what you're going to have there is you're going to have too much heat dissipated off of that cable, and you're ultimately going to cause damage to the cable from the extra heat in a small area. So the nice thing is here with Ditra Heat, as we install this cable, as you can see, Garrick finished out his cable here. He's got his end splice worked in. The nice thing is this cable is not a one and done installation. If we don't like the way it turned out, if we want to move the cable around, so we want to get it in a different area, it's just a simple pull it up and move it and reconfigure it to a different area if that's where you would like it to be. So we've got our cable installed. Next we need to install our temperature sensors. With our temperature sensors, we want to make sure that we get those as far away from the thermostat as we can and out into a nice open area, out into the floor, making sure that we're not going to install those under a potential floor rug or something that could inhibit the proper temperature reading from that sensor. So Garrick's going to feed that into the wall. With the temperature sensors that come in your cable box, we're going to want to make sure we install both of those temperature sensors. However, we only install and hook one to the actual thermostat. The other one gets coiled up into your box and is there as a backup or a spare in case this one were to ever fail. So he's just put some zigs and zags in it to help give it some tension and help it lay down into the membrane. And then he's worked his way back to the box and can run that up into his junction box for his thermostat. When it comes to thermostats, we have three different options. We have our non-programmable option, which ultimately all that can be done is just to turn the system on and off and to change our temperature. We have our touchscreen programmable thermostat, which allows you to set a program for the thermostat, turning it on and off when you come and go throughout the home. Maybe you want to turn it on in the morning when you wake up, turn it on after you leave, and then turn it on again before you come home. This can give you the availability to do that. And then lastly, we have our Wi-Fi programmable thermostat. This gives you all of the same functions, again, touchscreen, but with that Wi-Fi function allows you to download our app and get you the availability to hook it to your phone so you can actually control your Ditra Heat system directly from your phone. In larger floor systems, we also have our power module. The power module increases the floor capability or the capability that can be controlled by one thermostat in a large area. However, this will also need its own dedicated power circuit just as well as this cable did here. We're looking for a 20 amp circuit, and whether it be a 120 system or a 240 system, just however, make sure that we've got the proper cable that matches your power source. The 120 systems, the cables that are available in that system will max out at about 135 square feet in their largest cable. However, in the 240 volt system, our largest cable is 225 square feet, giving you much greater capabilities with that larger power source. So Garrick has got both of his temperature sensors installed, got both of them run up into his wall. And it looks to me like the cable is done and maybe we're ready to install some tile. Another huge benefit to this system is the availability to install directly after the installation. If we had a system in which we had to install self-leveler, we wouldn't be able to install tile until probably tomorrow. But this system, not only is it easy to install itself, but it increases your productivity by allowing you to install tile directly after that cable is installed. Also, we need to make sure that we again run through our tests on our cable to make sure that Garrick didn't potentially do any damage during the tile or the cable installation. So again, just use that meter and run through those 4 tests again. And make sure that, like I said, we didn't do any damage to that cable during that installation. In this installation, we're also going to show you how one of our profiles works in conjunction with a nice piece of tile here. Trowel size does not matter when it comes to tiling over the top of Ditra Heat. You just want to use what's appropriate for your tile, ensuring the proper amount of coverage based on the area that you're in. Again, we're going to want to use that back side or the flat side of our trowel in order to fill in all of those pucks, and making sure that we get thin set forced down in between all those pucks. With our Ditra Heat systems, we rely on our what we call a mechanical bond and not a chemical bond. So we need to force that thin set down in between all those grooves so that when it dries, it will actually adhere itself mechanically to that membrane. So what Garrick's done there is he's combed out some thin set. He's then going to take his profile, work that down into the thin set so that that thin set will squish up between his trapezoids, and then take just a little bit more thin set and comb that right over the top of that anchoring leg to ensure that we get proper support and proper coverage over the top of that. So he's taken his trowel and back buttered his tile to ensure that proper coverage. And he's just going to work that down into his thin set right along the edge of that profile, giving that tile assembly a nice finished look, but also some very quality edge protection to make sure we don't get any cracked edges on our tile. And just like that, we've got tile installed directly over Ditra Heat. So now that we've got tile installed, we're going to want to make sure that we take our megometer and run through our cable testing one last time to ensure no damage was done to the cable during tile installation. We can wait then approximately 7 days before we turn the system on, and then we'll be able to thoroughly enjoy our Ditra Heat system. So thanks, Garrick, for all your help today on my install.
Thank you, Doug.
So again, with warranty systems with the Ditra Heat, we have a 3-year product warranty on our thermostats. With our cable, if we do the first 3 tests, we can achieve a 10-year warranty. If we do that 4th test with that megometer, we can ensure we get a 15-year warranty. That megometer test is ultimately like turning a garden hose on at a trickle versus turning it on at full pressure. That megometer test will actually find that very small pinhole leak in that cable and the potential for damage and a failure in that cable. So that test is very important, and also, like I said, it gives you that extra 5 years of warranty. The mat and the tile assembly itself, when used all set, that you can purchase at Floor & Decor, gives yourself the potential for a lifetime warranty of the tile assembly itself. When we are installing tile or alternative floor coverings over concrete, our Ditra Heat Duo membrane here is a great option for that customer. As you can see, it has a nice thick heavy fleece on the back. That fleece acts well as a thermal break for that tile assembly to ensure that the heat comes up into the floor and not trying to heat your concrete slab. It also has a nice sound deadening quality for condos. Also, when we have our thermostat set on a schedule, this Ditra Heat Duo membrane helps with great response times and heat up times when that Ditra Heat cable turns on. When I mention alternative floor coverings, when we install alternative floor coverings over the top of Ditra Heat, we want to make sure that we always do a 3-2 cable spacing with that Ditra Heat cable. The reason being is we need a little more heat to be dissipated through that floor assembly. Alternative floor coverings don't transfer heat like tile does, so with that extra added heat, it gives you the benefit of the warm floor that you're looking for. Also, the other thing that needs to be done when we're using alternative floor coverings is that that is the one situation we are going to use a self-leveler over the top of our cables to give yourself a nice thermal mass to install that cable or under and a place to put your floor on top of. We need to make sure that the manufacturer of that flooring is okay with installing that flooring over the top of a heat system, as well as the manufacturer of the self-leveler. It needs to be a self-leveler that is okay for use with a heated system. Lastly, one of the other things I wanted to mention is that we can actually waterproof this floor assembly. We have our CurdyBand product, and this can be installed over all the seams in your flooring membrane, as well as on our floor-to-wall connections, and we can then waterproof this floor assembly. Ditra Heat can also be installed in showers. For further questions on that, please contact customer service or your local rep for further information. Lastly, I just want to thank Floor & Decor for having us out for this. I hope you guys learned something. Thanks, and have a great day.